I struggled my whole life with standardized tests due to undiagnosed ADHD until I took the EPPP. Hello, my name is Dr. Erica Liggins, licensed clinical psychologist and founder and CEO of the Crush That Exam program. And I am so excited to share with you a bit about my personal EPPP story and how I was able to score a 659 on the first try despite having crippling test anxiety and ADHD, as well as a long history of poor performance on standardized tests. So let's get into it. So everything started, of course, as a kid. I struggled with completing things on time. It would take me so long to do homework. I never would do my homework in order. I would jump around the page. I would get bored halfway through an exercise or activity and jump to the next thing and then get bored with that, then come back and finish the other thing that I was working on. And it was a real struggle. Staying on task was hard for me, but a lot of people didn't realize how much I was really struggling because at the end of the day, some kind of way, I was able to turn in my assignments and perform well enough that it didn't cause any, red flags to go up until I started to deal with standardized tests. And another thing I want to make sure so you fully understand my context, I've come from a large family of humble beginnings and, understanding around mental health and executive functioning issues was just not something we had a vocabulary for. So a lot of the problems I was having just were going unnoticed. But when I started taking standardized tests, there started to be a very clear discrepancy between my abilities and how they were reflected on these exams. In fact, when I was in the fourth grade, I did so poorly on a particular standardized test that it actually recommended that I be held back a year. Now, thankfully, I was doing well enough that I was able to still continue on with the year and be promoted to the next year. But those issues continued to plague me throughout school. When I got to, high school years, had to do the SAT, my scores there were quite poor as well. I believe that I barely got 1,000 on the exam, and I had to work very hard with extracurricular activities and strong essays and my other grades and recommendation letters and things like that to be able to still get into school. And of course, the challenges continued throughout school, always having to work longer and harder than everyone else just to make it. Now, when it came to going to graduate school, there was another entrance exam, the GRE. I scored so bad on it. To be honest with you, I repressed the score. I don't even know what it was. I just know it was so bad that I felt like it would hurt my application and that it would be hard to get into school. So I literally looked at my list of schools. I took out all the ones that required the GRE and I only applied to schools where it was optional. So you can see that these issues were continuing to plague me. So then I was able, thankfully, to get into graduate school and once again had to work so hard to make it, but I finished. Then the EPPP was the last thing standing in the way. And this is where my test anxiety went from moderate to severe. So, because the EPPP is the only way to get licensed, I found myself feeling so crippled by fear that I would never be able to pass, that it was completely debilitating. Every single time I tried to sit down and study, I would become overwhelmed with tears, serious crying spells, panic attacks, horrible negative thoughts. I mean, it was so paralyzing and so difficult. I couldn't even look at the sight of the books I was reading without becoming physically sick. I also would struggle to even read a paragraph and take notes because I couldn't think clearly because my brain was just so worried about failing, and not just about failing, to be honest. It was fear that I would never pass, that I came all of this way, had racked up all of these loans, and would find myself stuck, unable to function in the field and earn a living and actually do the job that I love. And so it was a real challenge. I went for months on and off studying, in and out, struggling to get any type of traction. I had no structure, no plan, no support. I was completely isolated and didn't know what I was doing. It was truly a terrible experience. And then I looked up one day and I realized my postdoc year was half over. And if I didn't pull it together and figure out how to study and pass this test in an effective way, then I was going to be without a job and unable to pay all of my bills, as well as these student loans that were going to be coming out of deferment. So I found myself literally, it was like the rubber met the road, and I had to figure this out. And so one day, after having another panic attack and crying myself to sleep, I woke up and I said to myself, something has to change. And so I went over to my books, took some deep breaths, and little did I know that I would eventually create an entire system that would help people to pass this test. But in that moment, I started to just piece together a plan that felt like it made sense, utilizing everything I had learned in psychology, as well as influenced by my own challenges with learning, and taking into account the way that the exam was structured. So I started to work this plan. Week by week, I broke down the content and I began to take steps forward. But that wasn't enough. I also had to work really hard on my mindset because remember, that's what was paralyzing me, making me stuck, making me ill, making me spin my wheels, right? And so I started to develop new beliefs to replace the destructive, anxiety ridden beliefs that I had had before. I started learning how to cope and soothe myself so that I could actually sit down and focus. And also, I incorporated all sorts of strategies to help me to manage my executive functioning issues. And little by little, I started to find my way through this. And after a few months of studying, I was at a place where I was ready to take my exam. So I'll never forget, it was uh, a nice day in August, August 5th of that year. I woke up ready to take my exam. I headed down to downtown. I had my playlist of positive songs with me, and I walked into that test center feeling like I had done everything that I could. I felt ready, I felt strong, and I felt confident that I could do it. So I walked into the test center, I sat down, and I looked at the first question and was like, oh my gosh, what is this? It was really difficult, especially those first few questions, but I began to lean into all the skills that I had developed. And I calmed myself down enough and I continued forward with the exam. And when I left the test center, the proctor handed me the paper. I flipped it over and it said 659. And I was stunned. I mean, I knew that I was prepared, but wow, I was shocked. I couldn't believe that someone like me who had struggled their whole life with standardized tests could find themselves not only passing a standardized test, but also doing so well. So I went home, took a very long nap to recuperate from the experience. And I found myself, just feeling so relieved and so grateful for the fact that I was able to pass that I started helping people informally around me. Anyone in my orbit who was planning to take this test, I started sharing tips and strategies, just giving them everything I could because I didn't want people to feel the way that I had felt. So one day over lunch, a dear friend of mine encouraged me to become an EPPP coach. She said, you've really been helping a lot of people. You should do this like for real. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? I don't Is that even a thing? I didn't even know. But with a little bit of pushing and encouraging from different people, I decided to give it a try and become an EPPP coach. And very quickly, I saw that there were people out there just like me with different barriers and challenges who had not yet figured out how to study for this test in an effective way. And in that moment, it became my mission to develop a program that would be different, that would be accessible for people like me with different challenges, and that could also be effective. Like I always say, I wanted to create a program that I wish that I had had. And now, all of these years later, Crush That Exam is here, helping people from all different backgrounds to pass their psychology licensing exams with confidence. And I'm proud to say that we're just getting started. We're ready to keep moving forward and helping people just like you to get over their exams too. So, if you want to know a little bit more about what we do and you want to meet other people who really understand your experience, be sure to join our Exam Crushers community so that you too can receive some support. Thank you so much for taking the time to hear my story, and remember that you can crush it too.